Strickland will make an excellent addition to the New Mexico District Court. She began her legal career in the law offices of the Public Defender for the state of New Mexico, a role in which she handled every type of criminal case. Over the years, and this is an amazing number, she's tried nearly 90 cases. The vast majority of her practice has been in federal court. Here in the Senate, Ms. Strickland boasts the strong support of her home state senators, Senators Heinrich and Lujan. Her nomination also received bipartisan support in our Judiciary Committee. She received a well-qualified rating from the American Bar Association, and like so many of the nominees coming from the Biden administration, she really shows professional diversity in her background. As a former public defender and civil rights attorney, she will offer a legal perspective that we often find missing from the bench. She's demonstrated an unwavering commitment to equal justice under the law, and as a judge, she'll ensure that every voice is heard in the courtroom. I urge my colleagues to support her nomination. On another note, Mr. President, in the coming days, the Senate has a historic decision to make, and very little time to make it. We have to set aside politics, which the American people are begging us over and over to do. And we have to ensure that our government can continue to function in the midst of this public health crisis and a recovering economy. Now, in any reasonable scenario, these would be non-controversial and nonpartisan endeavors. But sadly, at this moment in the United States Senate, reason is in short supply. In recent days, some of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have indicated that they are prepared to, listen to this, sabotage the routine process of government for political reasons. This could have a catastrophic impact on this nation. Last week, Senator McConnell reiterated that Republicans will not join Democrats in voting to deal with the debt limit. What exactly does it mean? Well, imagine if you and I just up and decided to stop paying your credit card bills. If Congress fails to raise or suspend the debt limit before the Treasury runs out of cash, our nation runs the risk of default for the first time in history. That's why lawmakers have to set aside politics, as we have done nearly 80 times in our history, to keep the government's bills being paid. Truthfully, this shouldn't even be a debate. Raising or suspending the debt limit has nothing to do with any new programs or new spending. It's about paying off the tab that the government has already incurred. We're receiving the bill at the restaurant after we have had the big meal. The question is whether we'll pay it. Here's the kicker. Much of the debt that the Republicans are threatening not to pay was approved by Senate Republicans when Donald Trump was in the White House. In other words, we're being asked to approve the Trump debt from his years in the presidency, which largely had the support of the Republicans, and the Republicans are telling us, hands off, we won't accept responsibility for the things we voted for during the Trump years. The last time Congress suspended the debt limit was in August 2019, a little over halfway through President Trump's term. Between then and the beginning of President Biden's term, congressional Republicans approved $6 trillion in new debt. In fact, during Trump's one term in office, the national debt ballooned by 36%. Fiscal conservatives, during the Trump administration, the national debt ballooned by 36%. Well, that surely has happened before in history. No, I'm sorry, it is not. That's the fastest it's grown under any president in American history. The Trump years were the biggest debt years in the history of the United States. And now the Republicans don't recognize it. They want to walk away from it. You may be wondering, well, for what noble or productive purpose did the Republicans go so deep in debt during the Trump years? Well, a big chunk of it was Donald Trump's tax giveaway to the richest Americans. $2 trillion. $2 trillion in tax cuts for people at the super wealthy level in America. And now it's time to say to the Republicans, you voted for those tax cuts, the wealthiest people in America applauded you. Now would you at least step up and admit it? Nope. Now that it's time for Republicans to pay for the meal that they ate, the political banquet, They're vowing instead to dine and dash. They're taking a page straight from the playbook of Donald Trump, the man who called himself proudly the king of debt, a man who didn't pay his own bills as a businessman and who incurred the largest increase in the national debt of any president in history. And in the process, the Republicans, to take this incredibly inexplicable stand, are willing to risk the full faith and credit of the United States. When it comes to America's debt, default is simply not an option for any rational person. There is not a single American who will emerge unscathed if the Republicans execute this political strategy. Defaulting on our debt threatens Social Security payments for tens of millions of Americans, threatens health care coverage for tens of millions more, and could slash benefits for our nation's veterans. Who could be proud of that vote? On a national and global scale, default would be, in the words of Mark Zandi, Moody's chief economist, quote, financial Armageddon. It would send markets into free fall and threaten America's status as the world's reserve currency. Imagine that. You say to the seniors, well, maybe not on your Social Security payments. And incidentally, the stocks and the ETFs and the mutual funds and the investments you had for your retirement, hang on tight. They're about to take a huge hit, a hit that is totally avoidable. Back in 2011, when House Republicans initially refused to raise the debt limit, America's credit rating was downgraded. So what? Interest rates went up. So we're paying more money in interest instead of paying it for things America values: healthcare, education, infrastructure. Some economists believe that episode hurt consumer confidence and hobbled our economy in the Great Recession. It also stuck taxpayers with billions of dollars in increased borrowing cost. Think about how fragile America's economy is at this very moment. We're still recovering from a once-in-a-century public health crisis and the worst economic crisis in 75 years. The last thing we need is a self-inflicted crisis that is motivated by partisanship. Right now, our economy has to be our highest priority. We need to come together and get the government funded. We also have an obligation to provide financial relief to Americans who have been hit by the environmental disasters. My state escaped that, but tomorrow that may not be the case. You never know with these extreme weather events. Hurricane Ida was an eye-opener for many parts of this country. People are suffering. Disaster aid for these people is essential. We need to also help resettle the refugees from Afghanistan. They risk their lives for Americans. We should make a home for them here in the United States. And we also want to make sure that we support our military in every way possible. Instead of bickering and political brinksmanship, Congress needs to rise to this moment of crisis. The American people sent us to Washington not to manufacture crises, but to prevent them. That's exactly why Senate Democrats are moving ahead to put President Biden's Build Back Better plan in place. Pay our debts, invest in a prosperous future. That's our plan. We'd love to have Republican support for it. We have a once-in-a-century opportunity to consider working families, middle-income families, struggling families, not the wealthy. The Build Back Better plan will grow our economy for generations to come. If fully enacted, it'll create a future for every parent to take off work to care for a newborn child. Every high school grad can receive a college education and set their sights on a good paying job. And every senior citizen can afford prescription drugs they need without dipping into their savings. These investments will make America healthier, happier, stronger, and more prosperous. And unlike President Trump's giveaway to the rich, President Biden's Build Back Better plan is a prudent investment in our nation's financial future. We're going to pay for it. That's the Senate Democrats' intent. It will not be added to the deficit. I look forward to discussing that plan in detail in the weeks to come. Mr. President, I yield the floor. Before I yield the floor, Mr. President, I ask consent that Senators Thune, Heinrich, and Lujan be able to complete their remarks prior to the scheduled vote.
Is there any objection? Seeing none, without objection.
I note the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.